friends, welcome back to the channel. My name is Danny and I am so not an expert. Today we're going to be working on another block party block. For those of you who are not familiar, our block party blocks consist of a single block that I show you a tutorial on how to put together. I make two of each block, and eventually we will take all of these blocks and make them into a full-size quilt. All of our blocks are currently coming from a book by Quiltmasters called 1,000 Blocks. I'll put a link in the description box below so that you can get your own copy. Today's block is called Midnight Dream, and it is a foundation paper piecing block, which I gotta tell you was a little bit of a challenge for me. I've never done a foundation paper piecing project before, other than the It's So Emma paper that we worked on in a couple of live streams a while ago, but I haven't done an actual foundation paper piecing project before, so I learned a lot of things. A couple of quick things before we get started. If you're going to make this block, here's a couple of pieces of equipment that you might want to have in your stash just to have with you to make things a little bit easier. One of those is an add-a-quarter ruler. An add-a-quarter ruler adds an extra 1/4 of an inch to the top, and it's got a lip here that will help you when you're cutting and trimming your foundation paper. I've got one in a 6-inch, and then a 5-inch, and then I've also got it in a 12-inch as well. I was able to use the 5-inch for my entire block, but the 12-inch is probably a good idea to have as well. Another thing you're going to want to make sure that you have is a glue stick or some type of washable adhesive. It doesn't have to be anything thick and goopy. You want it to be something that's going to be really lightweight, and you're going to use just enough to hold the fabric to the paper so that it doesn't slide around until you can get it under the machine. I just used an Elmer's glue stick, which seemed to work just fine. The other thing you're going to want is a purple thingamajig, or some type of object that has a pointy end on it that's not going to poke through your fabric, but is going to allow you to get up underneath the paper to pull the paper off. This is what I used. A couple of other things to mention really quick, guys, before we get started. You're going to see some footage of me using my iron on top of my cutting mat. Now, I was very, very careful to make sure that the iron only touched the fabric or the paper. It didn't touch my mat. If you're going to do this, though, be very, very careful because you can melt your mat. So I don't actually recommend it, but I'm in a really small sewing space here, so I kind of had to use what I could go with. So just keep in mind, I do know that's not something that you're supposed to do, but I was extra careful when I did it. Well, guys, those are just a couple of things that you're going to need in order to get started. So let's head over to the machine and let's start this project. Okay, friends, I have all my pieces pre-cut already for me, as well as my foundation paper. Now, I did trim the paper a little bit so that it's a little bit smaller to work with. I don't have it on full sheets. This is just regular printer paper. I didn't do anything special. I know there's foundation paper out there that you can use, and if you have it, go ahead and use it. If you don't have it, you can use regular paper. It's just going to make it a little bit harder to peel it off later on when we're done. But I think it's still peeled off really well. The other thing you're going to want to make sure you do is you're going to want to change the stitch length on your machine. Make sure to use at least a 1.8 or a 1.6. A 2.5 or 2.0 is just going to be too big of a stitch, and it's going to make it really hard for you to pull that paper apart, and it's not going to hold everything together real well. So first step, make sure you set your stitch length. All right, 1.6 is where I'm set up ready to go. The next thing we have to do is we have to take these pieces of paper and we're going to have to fold them. And that's where this 1/4 inch ruler comes into play. The add-a-quarter ruler has just two sides to it. Obviously, it has the 1/4 inch addition that we're going to be needing, but then it has this nice sharp edge on this end. This works really well for folding the paper. So we're going to take this edge and we're going to line it up with our solid sewing lines, and we're going to fold the paper all the way around all of the lines. And we're going to do that. You're going to see why that becomes important later on, but it is going to save you time and stress later on. So make sure to do that first. Usually I just do one paper at a time. I'll fold the first one and then I'll go ahead and start with that project. So let's go ahead and start with the middle block first, and then we'll get to the outside blocks as well. Now, I didn't actually show you guys what this block looks like. Maybe that's by design. This one's going to consist of one middle block and two types of outside blocks, and we need to make 4 of each of those. So all total, we're going to have 9 blocks that we need to make and then sew together. But let's go ahead and get started with the middle one first. Now when you're folding this paper, you're going to want to make sure that you give yourself a nice crisp line. So I actually like to drag my finger across the line just to make sure I get a nice hard fold. All right, so I've got the paper all folded up and ready to go. You can see I've got it kind of all folded here. The first thing we can do is we start with number 1 on the paper, which the paper says light purple, but that's actually going to be our yellow fabric here that we have. So we're going to take this piece of yellow fabric and we're going to take the paper, we're going to flip it over right side down. I'm going to take my glue stick and I'm going to put just a little bit of glue in the center square because that's where we're going to be putting our fabric. Now you don't need a lot, just a little bit, just enough to hold it, okay? Now I'm going to take my fabric and I'm going to line it up, holding it up to the light so I can see through the paper, and I'm going to try and center it as best as I can in the paper. And then set it down, paper side up, and press firmly. Okay? Flip it over, press nice and firmly. Make sure that glue has a little bit of time to adhere to the fabric. Now it's not going to be super tight, so you're just going to want to be careful with it not to move it around too much. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look for step 2. Now we've already folded our fabric, or our paper, so it's going to work out really well for us. Okay? So we're going to take fabric side down. We're going to fold the piece of paper like this, and then we're going to take our add a quarter ruler with the ledge down, line the ledge up next to the piece of paper, and make sure that we have a 1/4 inch seam allowance there. If we have anything extra, we're going to want to take our rotary cutter and slice that up just to give it a nice trim. The reason for that is that that's going to give us a really nice clean edge to put our next piece of fabric. The other thing that I forgot to mention is I pre-measured all of my pieces before I started. So I went ahead and measured the pattern and then cut my fabric to match, giving myself at least an extra 1/4 inch allowance on top of the 1/4 inch seam allowance that I already had. So it was actually a full inch on both sides, 1/2 inch and 1/2 inch. After doing that, I think I would have given myself an extra 1/2 inch on top of that, just to kind of give myself a little bit more wiggle room, because there was a couple of pieces that got pretty tight. So if you're doing this on your own, I recommend giving yourself a full 1.5 inches or at least 1.25 inches surrounding the extra pieces that you need to give yourself that extra wiggle room. Yes, I know that is going to give you a lot of waste when it comes to the fabric, but really it will save you time in the end and a little bit of stress on making sure that you have the right pieces fitting up just close together. Now the one thing I didn't mention is you want to make sure that this very first piece of fabric is face up. That means right side is going to be facing up. Everything else will be facing down, but this very first piece has to be facing up, which can be a little confusing at first. But you're basically going to be building this block backwards. Okay? So this first one is face up. Now I'm using batik fabrics, so the right side doesn't really matter, but just make sure your right side for this first piece is up. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take number 2, which is our background fabric. I have chosen this really pretty batik gray with some white and yellow dots on it. It's really pretty. I'm going to take our piece there, and I'm going to line up this piece with the edge of the piece that we just trimmed. And that's where I'm going to sew. So I'm going to flip this over, and I have my solid line here, and I'm going to sew right on my solid line, and I'm going to start a 1/4 inch from the last line and go a 1/4 inch from the other line. So I'm just going to sew all the way across. All right, now I'm going to lay it back on my mat. Now you can see that it's all nice and sewn up together. So now I'm going to take that piece that we just sewn and I'm going to flip it up and give it a nice hard press with my finger. Now, because I've starched all of my fabrics, these fabrics are going to finger press really nicely. And that is definitely something that I recommend for you. If you are comfortable with starching your fabrics and you do regularly starch your fabrics, it's going to make this a much easier process for you because, like I said, those seams are going to press really nicely. Now, the other thing you can use, obviously, use your iron. You're going to see throughout the video I will be using my iron to make these pieces, but for right now I'm just going to finger press this one. So now I have it looking like this. So number 3 is the next one up. Same thing, I'm going to put fabric down, fold my piece of paper, take my add a quarter ruler, double check and make sure that I have a nice 1/4 inch seam there, which I do. Flip it back over, take another piece, line it up, and sew on the line again. Okay, so I've got number 2 sewn up. Now number 3 so I've got number 2 sewn up and number 3. Now it's time to get to number 4. Now number 4 is this top one here. Now we've already sewn a little bit of this paper onto our fabric already. So we're going to have to peel that back. Now just be very careful and do it gently. Usually if you get your fingernail underneath the thread and just kind of tug the paper gently, it usually comes off. But this is also a great time to use your Purple Thang. You can use your Purple Thang as well. So just get your underneath there. And pull it back. If you rip the paper a little bit, that's okay. It's not that big of a deal. Now that that's all done, we're going to take our add a quarter ruler again. We're going to line it up on that edge. Just making sure that we actually have the nice 1/4 inch, and we'll trim if we need to. Okay. Flip it back over so right sides are facing up again. And add our fabric pieces again. And then do the same on the other side. Alright, so there we go. Now would be a great time to go ahead and hit this up with your iron real quick. I am going to hit mine up really quickly. Making sure to be careful not to hit my mat. There we go. And then all we need to do now is trim up the outside edges. This has given me a seam allowance, so I want to make sure that I trim to the outside edge, not the inside one. Go. And there, my friends, is our first block. We only need one of these, so that's good. So we're going to go ahead and set that aside for now, and we're on to the next set of blocks. The next set of blocks, we're going to need to be making 4 of those. They are these corner blocks here. Look like that. We're going to go ahead and fold the paper and start adding our pieces. blocks are done, it's time to start on our triangle pieces. The triangle pieces are going to look just like this, and they're going to follow all of the exact same steps that we just did for the other ones. And we're going to be making 4 of these as well. So let's go ahead and get these put together, and then we can start assembling our final block. All right, now that we have all the pieces sewn together, we can assemble our block. The 2 corner pieces go there, or I'm sorry, the 4 corner pieces go there. 4 triangle pieces go like this, with the triangles facing out, like this. And then our 1 center block goes in the middle. Now, I have not taken the paper off yet. The whole point of this is the pieces are really tiny. Some of the corner pieces are really tiny, so I'm not going to take the paper off until I'm completely done sewing up the entire block. So I'm going to go ahead and start sewing these pieces up together. Now the great thing is that there is a seam allowance written right on our paper, so we'll know exactly where to sew. So I don't need to necessarily put my 1/4 inch foot on. I'm just going to go ahead and sew right on this line. All right, first row is sewn up together. I am just going to try to press these opposite directions. So the first row, I'm going to go towards the left. Second row, I'm going to go towards the right. And then the third row, I'm going to go back again towards the left. Now that way, when we get to the point where we'll start putting our rows together, the seams will nest up really nice. So this is what Midnight Dream now looks like. Isn't this great? I love these colors. These look so pretty. So now all that's left to do is pull all the paper apart, which is super easy to do. You basically just get your finger underneath the paper on the back side. Fold it really well with your fingernail at the seam. And then just tear it off like that. You can also use your purple thingy if you have one. You can put your purple thingy underneath there in between the layers and just lift up. Now again, we used a little bit of the glue, so it's going to stick a little bit, but that's all right. Just pull it apart like that. There we go. There we go. And then pull it off, just like that. All right, friends, I have had so much fun making this one. Thank you so much for joining me on this. We're definitely going to be doing another one of these on the channel, but this is our next block party block. Thanks so much again. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to click that notification bell so you'll be notified the next time a video goes live. And don't forget, we have our live streams on Sunday mornings at 10:30 a.m. Central Time. I can't wait to see you there. Otherwise, I will see you guys again next week. See you soon. Bye.
Is this all that you dreamed it be?